In today's show with PowerApps, we look at doing things like conditional formatting, hiding a consent button based on whether or not a bunch of values are true, and how to do some complex things there. Look at using a toggle button, and then we do a pop-up screen, and we tell you how to toggle in and out of that, even though it's all on just one screen. Pretty exciting stuff. But first, here's our intro. Hi, my name is Shane Young with Bold Zebras. Those guys. And today's show is all about Power Apps and making your app more usable, right? So we're going to look at a consent form that we built in a previous video, link below, where you're going to see, all right, now that we have a simple form, how do we do things like only let them press the consent button if they filled out all the fields correctly? And how do we do a pop-up screen to say thank you? And how do we send them an optional email that they can opt in and out of? So a bunch of little things like that that just take your simple form that did collect the data we needed, but makes it more of a user experience. So you also get to see me make a really ugly screen because I'm terrible at design, but that's something we've all got to get better at because it's really important in Power Apps. So let's just switch over to my desktop to get started. Okay, so over here, we're going to open up our browser and we're going to open up the consent form that we built in the previous video, right? So if you don't have any of this, it'd be kind of hard to follow along, but down below in the description is a link to that video where we built a very simple form. And so now we're just going to add a bunch of the whiz-bang features, right? And that first whiz-bang feature for me is going to be, we're going to give people a little prompt if they have entered a invalid email address to help them, right? We know we already changed the text to red. We did that in the previous video, but now we're going to also add a little pop-up. So say label, and we'll kind of make it just slide right in here. We'll fit it like this and like that. Maybe we'll scoot it up a little more. And for the text, we'll enter something like star, please check your email. So like that. And then we will set the color for this to red. So we'll just type that in. All right, so please check your email. So that's a good little pop-up. Now, we don't always want that to be there though, right? And to do that, we're going to go down here to visible. And so the visible right now is just set to true. So that's to accept a true or false value. And what we're going to do is we're going to write an if statement to evaluate whether or not that should be visible. Okay, and I'm going to paste that in because you don't want to watch me type all this, but we'll talk through what this is because this one probably took me 30 minutes, maybe an hour. Don't tell anybody. It was a lot of work because it's a very double negative kind of thing. So let's talk about it. So what do we do here is we say if, and the very first portion of our if is we're going to do an or. And so or is going to return true if either one of the two equations or any of the multitude, right? You can have two or more equations return true. So for example, I'm going to say if is blank email address. So if that returns true, then I don't want to show this header, right? Because what we see down here is the if statement is false, right? So if all of this returns true, if this returns true, then it's going to be false. And so this thing will not be visible. So if the email address is blank, then it's true. So we don't want to show the thing, right? We don't want to show on a blank form the pop-up. That makes sense. Then we have another if, right? Ifs inside of ifs. It gets confusing. I'm sorry. And inside that if, I have an and statement because I needed to do two evaluations. So I said, if email address is not blank, right? That's what this little exclamation point is. So I'm using the is blank function and the exclamation point, which is the not function. So if email address isn't blank, okay, so if they've typed something, so that's true. Okay, so there's one true. And if email address.text.email is not a match, right? Not is a match. So is not a match. So if both of these things evaluate to true, then we know they've typed in something that is not correct. And so if that is the case, if both of these things are true, I want to return false, right? This is where I got really wrapped around the axle because remember that we're hiding this value if all this stuff returns true, but we don't want to hide it if, for example, if there is blank and it's not a match, we want it to be true, so then we would display it. So this false and true, right, is attached to this if, and then this false and true is attached to this if. I know it's complicated. I could sit here and talk about it for an hour to try and explain it. This works. Feel free to break it down. Feel free to leave comments below and tell me that I'm crazy and I could have done it in a more simple way, because I'm guessing there is a simpler way. But this is how I took a bunch of negatives and positives and flipped them all around. And the end result for me is, if we hit our preview button now, is if we type in some text, please check your email. And then as soon as we get into a proper form, then it goes away. Or if it is completely blank. So that was how I did that particular functionality. Now you notice as soon as I start typing, it does this. So you can also adjust that. I was like, that's annoying. So if you go over here, and what you want to do is you want to go back to the email box itself, and there is a property here called delay output. Where is it? There it is, delay output. And so by default, that is false. But if you do true, then what will happen is, while they're typing, if they kind of type in one fell swoop, then they shouldn't ever see that message, right? So if I go in here and I say shane@boldzebras.com, we never got the pop-up because we delayed the output. Without the delay output, as soon as I typed in the letter S, that pop-up showed up. So those are, once again, the little tricks that make this work a little better for us. All right, so hopefully that gives you an idea, right? And I keep calling that a pop-up. That's not really a pop-up. That's more of just kind of choosing when or not to display a specific piece of text. But hopefully that gives you the idea. Okay, so for our next thing we're going to look at, we're going to jump into is graying out the consent button unless they've filled out all of our fields, right? That's one of the things we want to do. We don't want them to be able to consent to a blank form. So we're going to do something very similar there. So with my consent button, if you click on it and then you go over here, you're going to have the option for display mode. I'm scrolling the wrong way. And so right now, display mode is just edit, right? Anybody can edit it, aka anyone can use or interact with the button. So we're not going to do that. We're going to write another if statement. Power Apps, especially if you're doing a good job of formatting, hiding stuff, right? You end up writing a lot of ifs, and that's okay. It's a good exercise. You just gotta get your brain wrapped around that logic class you took, a million years ago in school. Okay, so here is my logic, and this one is way less complicated, thankfully. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna say if, and then first thing we're gonna do is an and, right? So that means if everything in here is true, then we're gonna do the true action. So what we're gonna say if blank image is not equal to pin input image. Actually, this should be signature. I changed my variables along the way. And then we're going to say if age is greater than or 18, if not blank, so if name is not blank, if email address is not blank, then bammo whammo, we will set the display mode to edit. If any of these things is false, then the display mode is going to be disabled. Okay? Now, age and name and email address, those are pretty straightforward, right? And not a lot to think about or overcome there. So not going to spend much time on there. Those are pretty straightforward. But this is the hard one. So here, it turns out that with our pin input, there's no way to actually know that I can find, right? Maybe someone smarter than me is going to show up on the comments and say, hey, you're an idiot. I hope so. But I couldn't find a way to figure out if the image had been changed, right? If someone had actually scribbled something in there. So what I had to do was I actually ended up creating a variable to store the value and then see if it had changed, right? So signature.image, and if you're like, well, what's in signature.image? That's a great question. So let's grab that, right? Our thing's not going to work. We got an error message right now, but that's okay. So we're going to grab signature image. Let's go down here, and this is how I figure out what's in stuff, right? We're going to grab a label. We'll just put it here for a second. And for the text value, we're going to paste in signature.image. And so if you can see that down there at the bottom, let's make this a little bigger. So down there you can see it's a blob field. So blob : HTTPS blah, 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 a PowerApps address. So it turns out that every time you scribble in this box, they're going to change that value, right? So if we hit play, so right now it ends in 95B. If we do a little scribbling, now it's 2CB, now it's C1E, right? It's a crazy method, but essentially every version of that image is getting sent out to PowerApps.com for us to reference. And we talked about in the previous video how to email out that image, right? Not send them that crazy link, but to actually turn that into a file and send it. But what we need to do for our consent button to work is we need a way to gray it out if based on if someone's put in content there or not. So how I chose to do that was I'm going to go back up here to the screen. And so for the screen, I'm actually going to create a variable. So we're going to say onVisible, and we'll paste this in. So what I did is I said update context, create a variable named blank image, and set its value to signature image, right? So when the form first loads and we know it's blank, just store the value, store this URL in the blank image variable. So then on our consent button, what did I do? I said, if blank image is not equal to signature image, I know that they've touched it, right? I know that they've interacted with it in some capacity, and then I know that it is hopefully got data. Now, unfortunately, I can't tell if they only put a dot in there or if they put a bunch of information and then erased it. All of those are going to return valid things, but this was as close of a solution as I can get. If someone's trying to game my consent form, well, God bless them, they probably can. But right now it's all locked in, right? But when we change this, it's like, oh, still, right? We're still all undone here. We got to be greater than 18, still grayed out. We'll put in an email address, Shane at, it's funny, I keep trying to type in my old email address from like years ago. I don't know why. I think because all my demos I ever did were that. But so boom, now that we filled out the whole form, our consent form has, or consent button has lit up and we're able to change it. And that was thanks to being able to go in here and set the display mode, right? So if blank image is not equal to signature image, check. Age is greater than 18, 27, check. Name is not blank, check. Email address is not blank, check. So everything was true. So we set the display mode to edit. And if you look at the full formula, it's actually display mode.edit. They just hide that formula. And when all of these things aren't true, display mode is disabled. Pretty cool. Here, we'll delete this label out, right? He was just to help us understand what was in the data. And so if we hit play, we can see consent is good. If we hit refresh, boom, it goes back to everything's 0, and that's all good. Now, one thing you need to keep in mind, though, when we hit refresh, let's go back and fix that button real quick. So we reset name, email address, age, reset signature. What else do we need to do? We need to re-update our variable, right? Because now we want to set blank image back to the value that is currently in the signature box, which is the empty image. So it's one of the harder things about working with this blank image thing is that, we set the variable in the form first loaded, but now when we refresh, we got to reset that variable. When we consent and send it off and then reset the form, we have to remember to do that again also. So it does add a little more complexity, but that gives us the ability to do that check and then take action on it. Okay, so that has given us a lot of new functionality here, right? We've got the little email warning text. We've been able to change the consent button based on whether or not they've done anything. Next, let's incorporate our little toggle button into the whole equation. So a couple of cleanup things with him. One was I noticed that when I click on him that his true value is blue. That does not fit my theme. How rude of me. So let's make him look correct. So we will say true fill and we'll stick to black like everything else. All right, so let's fix that. Also down here on our reset button, you guys are letting me slack, but I forgot to also say let's reset. And then he is receive email. Right, and remember reset's going to set it back to its default value, which in this case is false. Okay, so that fixes the button. A couple things I should have done the first time. But now how do we take advantage of this whole toggle? So what I want to do in my example is I'm actually going to go in here to my consent button and I want to update on select. And so basically what I want to do is if they chose yes there, I want to send them an email, a separate email. I'm not going to copy them on this current email because this one has, all the things I need for my records. It's not well formatted. It's not polite or anything. It's just the data I needed to capture. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to send them a second email. And to do that, I'm going to put a semicolon in here, right? So that says, hey, consent, do that first thing, send that first email, semicolon, do something else. And to do something else is right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with an if statement. And we're going to say if receive email.value, right? So the value of this toggle is true, right? Remember that toggle is either true or false. And so we know with if statements that it just does something whether something is true or false. So this is putting in, right? This is, how would you say, equating or, has the value either stored as true or false. So if this returns a true, right, then we do the true action. If it returns the word false, then we're going to do the false action. So if it returns true, which means they said yes, we're going to say office365.send email. And then what we're going to do is we're going to send it to the email address.text. So whatever they typed in right here, the subject can be something polite like, hey, thank you for consenting to our form. And then the body, right, is right here. And then that's where you would say, you know, hey, here are the things you consented to, blah, 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 right? I wouldn't send them a picture of their what they typed in. I might incorporate their name in there so it sounds a little more personal. You might not care. I don't know. But from here, you're just sending an email. And the key factor, though, was we did the if receive email value. And that's how we took advantage of the toggle to decide whether or not to send this second email. And then you can see if that returns false, then I just return false. So essentially, it's like, oh, if it returns false, then just don't do anything. False, nothing here to do, move on. So that's how we incorporate the toggle into our mess. Once again, though, it's another field. Got to make sure we reset and analyze the value. So pretty straightforward there. For our last trick, we're going to make a pop-up that goes over the form when we submit it, and then hopefully, kind of gives people an experience so they see, okay, I did get it submitted, everything was great. Now, I can also tell you that I feel like I'm going to butcher this part because there's a bunch of weird, kind of order of operations. I'll probably get it wrong, but at the end, it'll all work. So that's what matters the most. Okay, so back over here on our app we're working on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over here to icons. If you scroll through the list, you got to scroll for a while. Like I usually give up and think they're not here. Down here we have some shapes. So I'm going to grab a rectangle. And what we're going to do is we're going to take it and we're going to make it cover our whole form. Bye-bye form. And then we're going to change the fill. I have a hard time, right? I'm originally from the South, so talking is very difficult for me. We're going to change the color from this blue into like a dark gray type of color. And to do that, I'm going to paste in this color that I grabbed off the internet. And so 169, 169, 169 is a gray, right? It's on the PowerApps site. If I remember, I'll put a link down below to where I got the colors from. But then the last number of the whole RGBA function is like the percent that you can see through it, right? So 0.75, kind of grays out things. Whereas if I do like 1, the whole screen is gray. And if I do 0.1, you can barely tell I did it. So I don't know, for me, I've been doing like a 0.75. That gives it that effect of, okay, the screen is grayed out, but yet you still know it's there. You don't feel like you went to somewhere different. Okay, so that's the first piece of it. I needed my rectangle. I've also been slacking on labeling stuff, so we'll do this. We'll call this my pop-up screen. Like that. What was label 2? Label 2 was our email warning. Let's fix that as well. So that was a label email warning. Sorry, I get distracted. Okay, so that gives us our pop-up screen there in place. And then on the pop-up screen, we're going to add two things real quick. So add a label. And so the label will say, thanks for filling out our form. Like so, and then I'm going to take my label and I'm going to take it and we will just fill it with black, which makes my text really hard to read. So then we'll go over here to my color and I'll change my text to white. Ah, much better. And maybe I'll use the home tab here, right where I could have also done my text. But we'll make that bold as well because I like bolding things apparently today. We'll make it a little bigger. And we will center it. Boom. Thanks for filling out our form. Yay. And then, I've seen people do like little cutesy, put a little circle here that's a X that they can click to close out, which is, we're a little more used to that. But just for simplicity's sake for today, I'm just going to grab and put a button down here and we'll call this close. But right, you could do the same thing with an image. We showed you how to do that just a few minutes ago. And so for this, we'll once again change our color to black. All right, not color. Yikes. Sorry about that. We'll escape out of there. That puts it back. Shoo. We'll say our fill is black. Okay. So that gives us, thanks for filling out our form, a nice little close button. And we should go over here and label these. So we'll say button close. And then we'll say label thanks. And then we've already got our pop-up screen. Okay, so those three items make up our our pop-up screen for us. And you can see they're currently laying over the top of them. And so what we're going to do with those is we're going to take these three. So we're going to press our control key. Boom, boom, boom. So now I've got all three selected over here. And then on the home screen, I have the option to group. And so we're going to say we're going to group those three things together. Cool. So now they're one little group. And we could just make this pop-up. So we knew what the group was. We only have one group, not a big deal. But then with our group, there are different settings you can set for the group. And the one that we care about the most right now is visible. So right now, visible is true. It's probably not our end result though. What we want is we want to now create a variable. We're going to call our variable, pop-up or something like that, that we assign the value of true or false. And so depending on what that variable is, that is when we will, whether or not we'll show this. So let me jump over, see, sets that. So let's create our variable real quick. And with our variable, we're going to set that over here. We'll go back to our friend. Where's our consent button at? Oh, consent button. Oh, I did not label him. How rude. Button consent, right? See how hard it was to figure out what button 1 was? But button consent, I know what that is. And so we're going to go back to him. We're going to add another semicolon here. And we're going to say, we're going to use a context variable. Link below to variables if you don't understand those. You haven't done those before. But we're going to create update context. And we're going to say, a little squiggly brace, pop-up equals true. Close the squiggly brace, close the rounded guy. What doesn't it like? Oh, it's not, you don't use the equal sign. I was just making fun of myself for doing that wrong, and then I do it on the video. All right, so pop-up semicolon, when you're doing update context, you use a semicolon. Or no, a colon, that's not a semicolon, it's a colon. Pop-up colon true, and that's going to set that variable to true. Okay, so then if we go back to our pop-up here, we're going to say pop-up. Right, because we know in our pop-up variable, we've stored the value of either true or false. So we say visible equals pop-up, and if pop-up is true, then this shows up. When it's false, these things are hidden for us. So that's how we're going to make that. And then what we'll do is we'll go down here to our button close, and for button close, we'll say on select. We're going to do more with it in a second, but just to show the rest of this concept, we're going to say on select for this guy. We're going to do what? Update our context again. Pop up and set him to false. And then just do like that. And so then now, if we click on this, it'll set the variable back. And so it's toggling between the two. And so when we do what is your name? So we'll do Shane. We'll say Shane at Bold Zebras. I should have like an auto fill in for all this. Boom, boom. And then now we say consent. Boom. Thanks for filling out our form. And then we close. Now, right now, when we close, we come back to a dirty form. Oh, that's all right. We know how to take care of that, don't we? So we're going to go over here. This is our lovely little reset script. So we're going to copy all that. Oh, can't select it that way. Highlight it all and then hit Control C so you can get that out of there. And then we'll go back over here to our button close. Oh, click on button close. So on select. Update context, that's great. And then put in all that. So then that way it will turn the pop-up off and then it'll reset the form all completely back to blank for us, hopefully. So let's hit play again. And so now we'll hit consent again, just filling up my email box with these things. Boom, there's our filling out our form. And when we hit close, we're greeted with a blank form. Pretty cool stuff, right? That gets us to a functional solution, I think, right? We need to think about, do we need to update the image anymore? But we took care of all of that with the reset. That's right. Our reset went ahead and set our blank image back to signature image. So that took care of that variable. All of our reset functionality took care of these pieces. So I think that ties up all the loose ends, right? We've sent out emails. We have thanked our people for doing it. We've given them the ability to set the form back to blank. We learned about pop-ups. We learned about conditional formatting. A lot of really cool stuff here. If you have any questions about any of it or something I missed, something I should have explained better, differently, definitely comments below. And then also, if you have ideas for future videos, right? This whole video was made because George reached out to me and said, hey, how do you do this thing? And, and we kind of talked about some stuff. He built his own form. Actually, if I do a good job in post, I'll show you a picture of the form that he built. But from that conversation on one of the concepts of all of this, it inspired me to make this whole video for you guys. So hopefully you like it. And hopefully this was helpful for you. So thanks. Have a great day. Hey, it's me again. Just a reminder, if you don't mind, click the old subscribe button over here. That always helps me out. Or if you want to work together, you can always hit me up through the bold zebras. Or if really what you want is some more of these Power App videos, which is probably what you want, then the playlist is somewhere on the screen here. All right, thanks. Have a great day.